Welcome back. We're here at the Real Estate Roundtable with IPRG, and we want to talk about stuff that we find interesting in the New York City real estate market. So we have two topics today that we're going to go over. Topic number one is the Fed announced yesterday, which was September 21st, that they're raising the Fed funds rate by 0.75 of a point, 75 basis points. So we're going to talk about how that's what we think, how we think that's going to impact the market. And then second of all, our topic for today is buyer mistakes and how buyers can prevent making mistakes that we see them making. So to kick it off, the Fed announced that they're raising interest rates yesterday. We've seen interest rates for bank financing going up, over the past few months.
Yep.
So I guess to start it off, where are we seeing bank rates at this point?
I could start it off, and I feel that the banks right now, I spoke to a few brokers in the last couple of days, and I think some of the banks were really anticipating the rates going up.
Yeah.
So I heard anywhere between low fives to 5.75. I also heard one bank, a bank that we've done a lot of business with, they're at 6%, but a lot of that is just anticipating the rates going up.
What's the asset class?
So I asked the broker that we speak to, I said, hey, where are you seeing rates for small multifamily, middle market multifamily mixed-use buildings? And he was very clear, and he said 5.5 to 5.75, and there were some outliers at 6, and there was also an outlier at 5.25.
Got it.
I also talked to a friend of mine that said they locked in on a small little deal of 5 flat right before the rates went up.
Yeah.
Who knows if that's actually true? But
are you seeing a difference between acquisition and refinance?
So I both these questions were on acquisition.
Yeah.
Refinance, I think that the market has reset a little bit. I think the rates are much higher in refinance. I think banks are really, really stutter stepping on taking people out of deals. That's my
I agree.
experience.
That's what I'm seeing. That's why I asked. I wonder if you were seeing the same thing.
I agree.
It seems that they're also anticipating future hikes. So on that cash out, I think they're being very conservative, and they're asking for extra points there.
I mean, I think on refinances, 2 months ago they were in the mid fives.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the Fed is trying to slow down the economy, right?
Yep.
The economy was overheated. There's a ton of inflation. We haven't seen inflation really pull back at all. So the Fed is raising rates to combat inflation. They've basically announced that they're going to keep raising rates until they get inflation under control. We talked about all the inflation, all the growth in the rental market over the past year, and there was also an article in the Real Deal this past week basically saying that there's preliminary cracks in the rental market. It said that concessions are back for luxury buildings where the rent is over $5,000 and the property is not in close proximity to public transportation. So it basically said luxury buildings that are well located, but not right on public transportation, where the rents are over $5,000, those properties have to offer concessions, which the Real Deal reported is a slowdown in the rental market. So my question here is, have we seen a slowdown in the rental market? Do we think that what the Fed is doing is impacting the rental market?
Well, I think we discussed this on the first or second podcast. The two things that drive real estate, and that's interest rates and rents.
Yeah.
And we all had the argument that rents are outpacing interest rates, right? We said interest rates are going up, but so are the rents. And the rents are so high, and the reason why the market hasn't changed is because the rents are winning. Now I think you're running into some dangerous waters. I think the rates are really going up. And when rates go up, there's adjustments in the market and the economy. And I think we're starting to see that with this rise in rates and where inflation really is, people can't afford what they could afford. And now I think you're going to see something change. I think you're going to see rates go up. And I think you're going to start seeing rents dip.
Do you think rents will dip or stay flat?
I think that rents are going to start coming down a little bit in certain markets.
So
and you're seeing, there was an article too, not in the Real Deal. They said that across the country, rents are taking a dip.
Got it.
This is not just a New York thing.
So you think that we could see some deflation on rental amounts from where we were?
I do, and that's not a good thing. I think it's a good thing for buyers. I think there's going to be a tremendous opportunity to buy buildings in the next 6 months to a year. But from a value standpoint and selling properties at high values, I do think, there's inherent dip there.
So a 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom, any unit, you think rents will be less in a year from now or the same? Is that?
I don't want to say a year. A year's a large time.
Yeah.
It's a big time frame.
Yeah.
I think in the next 6 months, I mean, people are talking about it. It's not just the news or the real deal. Clients of ours are saying that they're starting to offer concessions. The units are sitting, and these are. I mean, I was talking to Justin before this podcast. I mean, he said he talked to a guy that owns a lot of stuff in the Village, a lot of stuff in Lower Manhattan. He is offering concessions. He sees a rental dip.
In my opinion, yes, the rental market has cooled off, but these concessions or this dip you're seeing is still on astronomical numbers, right? These are rents they could not get or even anticipated in their pro formas getting in 2022.
True.
So that, I think, is a thing you got to pause and step back. Like, yes, you're not asking, there's not month-over-month growth for the first time in, since the pandemic and since people came back to the city.
No, but the point I'm making is...
But it is slowing down and reversing a little bit.
I agree with everything you just said, but rates aren't done. I mean, they're going up again. And he even... Listen, the Fed said, anticipate a housing correction. It's going to happen. So I think if they raise rates again, you're going to see rents come down
They're
again.
going to keep raising rents.
Because it's not just like
rates.
It's not just like, oh, inflation, everyone has more money and they're going to pay more. No, I mean, people right now, rates are going to go up and everything's going to get more expensive. Their credit cards, their car payments, if they get laid off, and you hear companies making layoffs. I mean, if people can't afford the rent's going to go down. They're not going to pay, and that's just the facts.
I touched on that a handful of weeks ago when we were discussing it. Like, we were selling this 5-building portfolio, and the rental market was going up, and it's the only time in the market where I've seen such explosive growth in the rental market, and the actual offers from the buyers were staying the same.
So, all right, so now I want to know, how does this impact the real estate market, the sales market, for the stuff that we're selling? These higher rates, rents are potentially slowing down a decent amount.
Prices are going to come down.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a broad statement, but buyers have now seen the proof that the rates are rising, and there's no sign that they're going to stop it anytime soon.
Correct.
They're seeing an economy that is not strong, and I say that just based on an observation where people are losing jobs, wages aren't keeping up with inflation, and inflation seems to be continuing. I think it was like 8.3% in August, and who knows what the impact's going to be this month, but I think for the first time in 2022, you're seeing it where like you can actually see the tides turn pretty dramatically in the buyer's favor. And I think if someone's considering selling, they should probably make a move pretty quick.
So you think higher rates but lower prices is in the buyer's favor? Even though the buyer's paying more on cost of capital.
I do, because I saw some 100%. I saw some other reviews from guys like Jamie Dimon where they think, we're going to enter this recession in late 2022, which we're already starting to go into, and they think I think it was Ray Dalio said it's going to go far into 2024. And I think a lot of people are anticipating rates to come down in 2024, 2025. So if you can lock in 5-year money at a higher rate but a lower price point,
and try to knock off that prepayment as much as you can.
As much as you can, in 3 to 4 years, you're probably going to be sitting pretty.
So I saw something where Grant Cardone was saying that the
It's a beautiful man.
next 6 to 12 months, he thinks it's going to be an unbelievable buying opportunity. So is that all because just the interest rates are higher, which means prices are going to come down? And are sellers going to sell into that market?
You're always going to have sellers that have to sell just because of lifestyle or difference in their life, or just they want to cash out at some point. They might have owned it for 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And I think you're definitely going to see that. I mean, I think it's spot on. We're at the tip of the iceberg where it's coming down.
So we're talking this podcast about buyer mistakes, and we're saying that we're entering what may be an unbelievable buying opportunity, right?
Absolutely.
So we'll get into that. My last question just is people that have these properties and their loans are coming due, because all these commercial loans, they're 5 or 7 year money for the most part. So what happens when someone had a loan for low 3% interest rate, 5-year money, it comes due in 2023. Now the interest rate is practically doubled. And all else being equal, say it's a rent stabilized property, say, still underwriting the same debt coverage ratio, the NOI is the same for all intents and purposes, but your interest rate is double, so you're not going to get the same loan proceeds. So when they go to refi, if they refinance, it's going to fall short. So what's the angle there?
I don't think there is an angle.
Or what's the play for them?
I think the play is to extend the loans. A lot of these loans have those provisions in them, and they're
Extension option.
extension option. I mean, obviously, the rate's going to adjust, but they don't have another option. Most people, especially if you raise money, what are you going to go to your investors and say, "Hey guys, we have to pay down this loan. I need $2 million." Like that's throwing good money after bad, and most investors won't do that.
So these owners just let the property roll into another 5-year option,
Yep.
new payment penalty, and just they're probably going to start losing money on it. If it had a
100%.
1.25 debt coverage ratio at a low 3% interest rate, and now the interest rate's going to be like in the 6% range, these properties are going to be cash flow negative for sure. So the play is just to hang on to it and hope that interest rates come back down by the end of the next 5 years.
I just don't understand the play for rent stable. I'm amazed they haven't sold and cut bait already.
What are
You're going into a high interest rate. Okay, even if the rates come back down to even like low 4s, high 3s, your building's still not worth what it was when you bought it 10 years ago. Like
I think a
6
lot
years
of
ago.
people just have trouble stomaching the
They
fact
have
that their equity is so much less and it's so much more difficult to sell. And
It's going to be worse in 5 years.
But there's almost no point in selling. Like in so many cases, there's just not much cash left in the
These
deals.
guys are also most people that own this stuff. They're very wealthy, right? They losses aren't necessarily a bad thing, and maybe they have some losses in the portfolio. I think there's not a lot of owners that have big portfolios that can say that they don't have losses in their portfolio in the last 2 years or 1 year, and that's it.
It's kind of like the banks. They take the loss on their bottom 20% of their loans and they move on.
Yeah.
So
I'm surprised we haven't seen that in the rent stabilized market.
I think what you're going to see is what we saw in like the start of Q3, right? When there was like a big press push for increase in rates, and all of a sudden all the sellers that were like kind of sitting on the sidelines, like not selling, maybe they're selling. All of a sudden, everyone just sold, and I think there's going to be a massive flurry of activity coming up for us.
See, they made a good choice though. It's almost too late.
Well, yeah, but I think the people right now, like I think sellers see the writing on the wall. If they've been holding for a long time, they realize rates are about to tick up that much. Like values probably have to level off. So like people that were holding pre-pandemic, they saw the market dip. Obviously, the rents have come up significantly since. I think a lot of these people are about to just sell, and I think a lot of these are going to be single or single asset type of owners.
But going back to what you said for buyers,
Yeah.
this is going to be an amazing time for buyers. If you have the money to buy and you can get loans, like it's going to be a great time.
All right. So let's talk about this.
It's important. I mean,
No, 100%. So buyers want to buy property, right?
Yeah.
And brokers are, in most cases, almost every case, we're a conduit of the inventory that's available in the marketplace for buyers. So what are mistakes that buyers make, and how can they prevent making those mistakes to maximize their potential to get as much deal flow as possible and as much, opportunity as possible? So I want to start with Adam, since Adam might have to jump out of here early today. So Adam, give us just any ideas in terms of buyer mistakes and stuff that they can do to prevent to maximize their business potential.
I would just say like do as if what you say, right? So, and I think oftentimes buyers like throw out numbers or try to get an offer into a client, and for first time buyers especially, like they don't have the track record that some of the other guys have. So when a new buyer emerges and they're chasing a deal and they've been looking at other deals, and you finally like kind of go to the hoop with the client and tell them like, hey, we have this new buyer, here's the guy's offer. You get the offer accepted, and the buyer like a week later like he hasn't selected an attorney yet, or 2 weeks later like he hasn't really gotten up and down in the due diligence, and all the while the last 2 months he's telling me like I'm real, I'm well capitalized, blah blah blah. So I think just do as if you say, right? So I think for me it's if you're a new buyer entering the market and you kind of play around on one of the deals that we have, like you're not going to see deal flow from us moving forward. If you act as if you say you're going to act, then you'll continue to get deal flow, and there's 100 examples of it. Like we sold a nice property in Park Slope like a year and a half ago, and the guy was chasing a handful of deals, and finally he was like, this is the one I want to buy, and he signed a contract in a week. And that guy is seeing every single deal from us now because I know how he performs. And the guy that took
the guy does what he says he's going to do. He doesn't screw around. He moves expeditiously. He does his due diligence quickly. Mm-hmm. He's not just dragging it out. That's what you want out of a buyer. You want them to do what they say and not drag it out.
100%. Like we just sold a warehouse in Vinegar Hill. It was a kind of a redevelopment play. It had some R6B zoning, and the buyer basically signed a contract in 2 weeks. And guess what? That guy's going to see every single redevelopment deal. Is the first guy I'm going to call because I know how he performs, and I know that the sellers are going to enjoy doing business with him, and it makes our life easier.
Can you give us any examples of the opposite where someone didn't perform the way you want them to?
Yeah, so there's been a new buyer who
No names, obviously.
Yeah, so there's been a guy who's been emailing me a lot, like looking at a lot of our deals. Like we basically I think it was a 5-unit building, tenants in the building. He basically told me it was at a certain price and terms with the tenants in the building. I went to the hoop, got an accepted offer. He kind of dragged his feet. 3 weeks later, he's like, yeah, I need the building vacant. And basically, he was like, I'll give the seller $50,000 to vacate the building. I started laughing at him because I was like, first of all, the client's going to want probably $400,000 or $500,000 to vacate the building. And second of all, like you're completely changing the terms of your offer. Like, how can I take you seriously moving forward? And when we actually represented the offer to this guy, the client was literally laughing at the buyer. And it's really, really hard for me to show this guy more deals moving forward. So I think that's a big mistake.
And in an environment where there's interest rates rising and pressure on the sellers to kind of move on the quick side, buyers that drag their feet and play that game and hurt the seller's ability to get a fair market price at that time, it's just really not a cool thing to do, to act in a way where you don't do what you say you're going to do.
I want to throw something in as well.
Let's hear it.
I think being a buyer in New York City, it's a job, right? It's kind of like being a broker where you're making the calls, you're building the relationships, you're doing it, and buyers need to play the field. The buyers that I've seen that make the most money, that do the most deals, have relationships with every broker. And they put a lot of effort into that. They're making the calls, they're calling, they're making sure they're doing some FaceTime with that broker, and they're seeing deals, they're building relationships. And there's a lot of buyers that are out there that buy off the same broker every single time. They're overpaying for deals. Like, they don't really take the job of a buyer that seriously, right? Like, there's a way to be strategic when buying buildings in New York. And the people that I've seen that do the best, they're the ones reaching out, building relationships, and they're seeing every deal that comes to market, and obviously they're going to get good deals, but it takes a lot of effort. So I would say to buyers, play the field. Don't just buy off the same person. Build good relationships, and you will see a ton of deal flow.
Well, I think it's really just like respect the broker. Like, understand our role is generally to represent the sellers. If you want deal flow and you put an offer in, you better perform on that offer. Otherwise, you're not going to see any inventory.
100%.
And especially with our open office collaborative environment, like even if I'm not even involved in that transaction, but I hear that a buyer, didn't perform on a contract in Williamsburg, for example, like I'm not showing anything in the city. He's not seeing anything in Park Slope, et cetera. Like, so it's cross market.
And that word gets around quick throughout the market. It's not just it's not just in this office.
Yeah.
We're all friends with it. I'm friends with most of the brokers that are active. If I hear one time or 2 times or 3 times that a buyer messed around during contract negotiations, that's in my head.
But you know what's interesting on that point? Like, so I've spoken with just random brokers in our industry, that people that I don't communicate with that often, but maybe I check in with like once a year. And when we're just talking, we're chatting, and we're talking about how different people act on deals, and the way that certain buyers act with us is the same way they act with those other brokers. So even if the brokers aren't like telling tales of how people performed, the buyer, if they perform poorly around the market, brokers around the entire market aren't going to want to do business with them. So they're really burning a lot of bridges, and they're costing themselves so much on potential opportunities.
Yeah.
Well, I think, part of our job is being a matchmaker. And I think one of the more frustrating things about this business is when, a guy calls you and he's like, oh, I'm looking for this type of property. And you kind of remember that. And then you have the listing, you send it to the guy, and you never get any feedback. And then once the deal closes, like, oh, I would have bought it. And it's like, get us feedback on the inventory that we send you so we have a better understanding of exactly what you're looking for, and then we can transact with you in the future.
I was going to mention that. We've all gotten that email. Why didn't you send me this deal?
Mm-hmm. That's the best
And it goes
email
back.
to get.
It goes back. It goes back to what you're saying. Like, you have to be on the broker's radar.
Yeah. Like, it's a job.
We are going to sell over 100 deals this year.
Mm-hmm.
And for us to just mind read that you were looking for that one deal when you haven't provided feedback, You haven't answered my calls. You won't tell me what your investment criteria is. I'm not gonna know you want that deal.
Yeah.
100%. These all kind of go together.
Yeah, that's why it makes sense.
There's too many buyers in New York. Obviously, there's a ton of great buyers, and some buyers aren't as good. But there's too many buyers in New York that just sit back and just wait for deals. Like, you need to get out there. It's not, you can't just sit and wait for deals. It's not just going to happen. We need to know, as brokers, as active brokers, and it goes for any other active broker in New York, they need to be hearing from buyers, or they're going to forget about you, and they're not going to send you the right deals.
So, do you think the buyer needs to be like educating the broker on specifically what they're looking for?
No.
Or just basically saying, I'm out there, I'm looking to buy? Or respond to like individual deals with feedback on the deals that get sent over?
I think if you send them a deal, even if it's a quick note, give some feedback. Show us that you paid attention to it.
Just respond to the email.
The not for me email, I almost decide like I'm not going to send you a deal again. It just doesn't give you enough color. If I send you a deal, it's because I think you could like it, and we have inventory. We're trying to help forge your business, whether you like the deal or not. Just give us an idea of why you do or don't like it, and that way, future deals we can send you as well.
I was watching. There's this, and maybe we don't put this in the episode, or we do, but I was watching the Building New York episode with Aaron Youngrice this week, and he was basically saying that with all of his clients, he knew exactly what they were looking for. He knew the vintage of the deal. He knew like certain people wanted buildings built between 1938 and 1943, and he's like, I wouldn't waste people's time sending them stuff that wasn't a fit. He's like, I'd only because he has a reputation for being an extremely targeted broker.
Yeah.
And he would only send people what they wanted. So I think for me, brokers just need to know what the buyer wants. Give us the feedback. Tell us your criteria. Some people like certain types of properties and not others. And if we get that sense, when those deals land on our desk, we'll be able to like get them to the right buyer quickly and efficiently.
100%.
And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of noise in the market, right? Like buyers probably get inundated by brokers. That being said, though, deal with the guys that are active. Like I mentioned before, we're gonna sell 100 buildings this year. You should be talking to every one of the agents that work in a market you buy in at this firm and at other firms. Like you should be talking to people doing deals.
I gave this to my father-in-law. I mean, he's in a 1031. It's a small 1031 in Connecticut. He's like, Luke, what should I do? I mean, he's an older guy. He hasn't been active. And I told him, call every active broker in the space. If you're buying a commercial property in Norwalk, Connecticut, which he's looking to do, call the top 3, 4, 5 brokers. Say, hey, I'm in a 1031. This is how much money I have. I'm looking to execute. What do you guys have? Please send me deals. That's a great start. And there's so many buyers out there that don't do that. I mean, how many times have we seen a deal go through that's 40 million, 50 million, 20 million, whatever it is in Brooklyn, and you didn't know they were looking for it?
Yeah.
Like, what kind of buyer has that kind of money, trying to execute on deals, and they're not calling every single broker that's active, telling them what they're looking to do? How can you do that? That's the biggest mistake buyers make.
That's the most frustrating thing for us, I think, as brokers, when we know who the buyer is and we know who the seller is and we have all the information together and the buyer doesn't communicate what they're looking for and then ends up going doing some big deal that we easily could have pieced together, and we should have had the information because we know the parties, but the buyer never communicated that they were in the market for that type of opportunity.
For sure.
Another example of that is say we're selling a deal and it's overpriced, but it's something that a buyer likes. Without getting their feedback, there's been plenty of times where other buyers have given an offer where the seller has met the market and the other guys on the sideline were like, I would have bought it at that price. How am I supposed to know?
Well, yeah, so what you're saying is even if we have an overpriced listing, for example, or the property's very expensive, like, let us know where you buy it at. Submit an offer.
Yeah.
That way, it's like the more feedback you can give us to provide to the client, it helps them realize what the property's worth. And ultimately, instead of just saying, like, call me when the pricing gets real, offer on it. Therefore, we can at least keep you up to date.
But hold on, you made a great point. Call me when the seller gets real.
Yeah.
People do that all the time. A good buyer, which there's tons of, would have harassed you every
That's
week,
the
twice
difference.
a week. When does it come down? I'm at this price. Hey, if it gets down to 3.5, I'm buying it.
Yeah.
And all over them. That's because it takes effort, it takes work. Good buyers do that, and that's how they get those deals.
But that's the difference, right? How many times do we get to call me when they get real, as opposed to the guy that buys it is the guy that told me there's the price. I'm calling him before I'm calling you when the seller gets real.
Yeah.
So the buyer basically needs a deal board in their office of all the listings, all the deals that are of interest to them, stuff they're offering on, and keep track of like the entire portfolio of like on-market deals and follow up consistently for the properties they like.
Knowing what I know right now, if I wasn't a broker and I raised $100 million to buy deals in New York, I am making a list of the most active groups. I'm going to their office at least once every 2 weeks, if not every week. I'm making relationships. I'm making it know what I'm doing. And it is going to be my job to make sure that everyone knows who I am and what I'm buying. And I'm going to treat it as a job. And that's what I would do if I raised $100 million. And I think that's what buyers should be doing.
I mean, you saw a real example of that about a year or so ago. A very active Raise Capital group came to this office and met with us.
Oh, it happens all the time.
No, we hadn't connected with a deal with them. We would send them a lot of deals. We would always get feedback on it. And finally, we connected on a deal with them in Hell's Kitchen. And you know, those guys, once a month, are like, hey, here's the 4 or 5 deals you sent me. We're still interested. Where's the deal at? Keep me posted. And those are the kind of guys that they see every deal. They're top of mind with us. We want to do business with them because they perform, but they also give feedback on all the listings. And that's how you perform as a buyer in the market today and create good relationships with us and other brokerages.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest things to do in business is just the follow-up, like consistent follow-up. There's been a number of buyers that have like come to our office, introduced themselves, said they have money, they're in a 1031, they want to buy, and I send them some stuff, they never respond, and then there's like no follow-up on their part after that. And I guess you could say that works both ways, that I should be following up with them as well, but and not to say that I don't, but they're not pursuing the opportunities through this office anywhere close to as aggressively as they should if they want to see all the opportunities and be on the inside track for the deals.
You make a good point. I mean, we provide a service to the market. We have the deals. When I say we, I mean every broker that's active. If a buyer misses a deal, like that costs them and their fund money. They could if they put the time in and they get a deal from us that they make money on, that's not like a small thing. That's a big win. So to pass up opportunities because you're not working the market and working the brokers is a mistake.
Yeah.
It's a mistake that I would not make if I was a buyer.
All right, good points. So let's just talk any other buyer mistakes that we could think of offhand. I have a couple here, and I just want to see if you guys have anything else.
I have a few that I can mention that you guys can talk about.
Sure, let's hear it.
But I think retrading long contract, too much due diligence requirements prior to or even in the contractual phase. And I think slow attorneys are major things that you guys should mention.
Yeah.
Adam, it was obviously good seeing you. We'll see you soon.
Yep.
All right, go get him, Adam.
A big thing Adam just mentioned, attorneys, right? We've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of transactions in this room. These transactions, obviously, some are more complicated than others, but you don't need, Aristotle, like this top 3 attorney out of Park Avenue to do your deals. A lot of these people are over negotiating contracts, and it kills deals.
Let me ask you a question on that point.
These are simple transactions.
So, all right, so we have a contract of sale, okay? It's something that could, in theory, be litigated on if the transaction falls apart.
Yeah.
And people spend a great deal of effort making sure the contract is exactly how they want it to be.
Yep.
How many times have we seen these contracts fall apart and end up in like some form of litigation, or do we think that the attorneys are just overdoing it and it's a nice precaution, but it's something that doesn't really happen in actuality?
In my 10 years, I haven't seen it once that I know of.
Yeah,
I've seen it once or twice on deals blowing up. I mean, it's not common. Again, like you need a good real estate attorney. I'm not saying don't use a good real estate attorney, but you need one that has their rider. You could sign quickly. Contracts can be signed. I don't care what the deal size is. Contracts can be signed in a week, most 2 weeks, right? Like, and if an attorney's not paying attention, or if you're delaying because you're not real as a buyer, that's a different issue.
Let me ask you
The timeline's a good point, though. I agree. We've been on the other side of the table there, too.
Let me ask you a different question on the timeline, okay? Because these deals can be extremely complicated with all the layers of bureaucracy. The big one is obviously DHCR. You have Department of Buildings. You have HPD. You have title issues that could come up. You have potential liens. There could be just a number of things that require due diligence in the course of a sale. So, you say 2 weeks, but I'm wondering if a buyer could debate you and say 2 weeks is not enough time to conduct my due diligence.
Debate me now. What point do you want to talk about?
No, I want to talk about a rent stabilized building.
Okay.
Say it's a 50 unit.
Okay.
And you have to have the DHCR. You got to be comfortable on the DHCR
Yep.
side.
Okay.
So we're talking about slow attorneys. We're talking about due diligence, and I'm not saying that I think it takes 2 weeks. To go on the record, I think that should take a couple days. But I just want to get your sense. Is that a real reason
I was
for
gonna say,
delaying a deal?
We've seen DHCR review 1 to 2 days max.
As long as you have an attorney ready to review.
An attorney. So
Yeah,
have an attorney
okay.
ready to review it. On a 50-unit building, you're going to have an attorney review it. Then, if there's items that pop up, such as leases, canceled checks, IAI proofs, work on getting that. Now, if it's the broker's fault for not having it readily available, the contract period is going to take longer.
What do you
But
say?
if it's there,
What do you say to the buyer that doesn't want to start spending money on attorney review without an accepted offer or without a contract?
I think that goes to, I want to say relationship. I mean, if you know the buyer's real and you've transacted with them before and you know that they're buying this thing, I think there's situations that you could do that. But on a competitive deal, you can't do it to the seller. The seller's hiring you to represent them, and if you have 2 people looking to buy something, you got to keep their feet to the fire.
Yeah.
You can't take they can't take the pot off the fire because some person says, I need to buy this, but I can't. I can't call my attorney and I'm looking at everything and start spending money.
Do you think that this due diligence costs $2,000 to do
it's a real cost.
a
Yeah.
DHR review? But do you think the due diligence cost is just a cost of doing business as a buyer in New York? Like, is this a cost that buyers should be incurring on the deals that they're getting close on, or should they be waiting for an accepted offer, waiting for a contract, and then if it comes back bad, there could be a retrade, or they could end up stalling, as we said, don't do, or they could end up not buying the deal.
in my opinion, especially if it's a proven buyer and they have the capabilities, I don't see a problem with getting them a contract. As long as you're transparent with the seller and with the buyer, in a sense that I understand that before you spend money, you want to know that you have a potential deal. I'm going to get you that contract, but also know that this property is going to be continued to be marketed. Same thing with the seller. Hey, look, the guy is going to spend some money. He wants to buy this. He's going to do everything he can to buy this. But something might come up, so things might change. But in the meantime, we're still going to be marketing it.
I'm going to give you the example that you're looking for.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
We did it a few weeks ago. We did a big deal. It was a bunch of multifamily in New York, and there's 2 buyers that really wanted to do it. The buyer that ended up getting the contract and signing the contract, found out he's like, I need to review the leases. We got all the leases from the seller. It was in our office in Manhattan. Guy comes down with his partner, sits there for at least 3 hours, maybe 4 hours.
It was an entire day.
It was like an entire day. Reviewed every single lease and executed a contract. He wanted that deal. Buyer number 2, also very real, had a very belts and suspender attorney, right? It said, I need an accepted offer. Send everything to my attorney. Probably wasn't willing to just hit the ground and pound like this other buyer and review everything. Wanted it to all go through his attorney, which he knew was going to take a long time. So we knew that the process was going to be a lot longer. The other buyer, who executed very quickly, knew that and did it all himself and got it done. So this stuff can get done.
Let me ask you about, so just to put this a little into context, we're talking about deals where there's no due diligence as part of the contract. This is due diligence prior to contract signing. But what about buyers that are trying to get a 30-day DHCR due diligence as part of the contract? Because
that's worst case scenario. And obviously, if you have no one else, and this person's doing it, and you feel relatively comfortable, like you can entertain that.
I just don't see a reason for it.
You should never do that.
There's absolutely no reason. You can do the DD on DHCRs prior to contract.
Yeah.
And listen, I'm not going to belittle the DD expense. It's a real expense, right? It costs attorneys a few $1,000s to review stuff. But guess what? This is a costly business, and it's real estate, and there's costs. If you're trying to buy a deal, there's costs, and it's a competitive market.
Yeah.
You have to do it.
All right. So another buyer mistake, and it's not that we see this often, but it has happened. Obviously, this is one of my least favorite things that a buyer could possibly do. This is burning the bridge entirely. But when buyers will wait for the listing to expire and then go around the broker direct to the seller, is that something that we ever see? It's happened, right?
Occasionally, I wouldn't say it's the most common practice.
It's not common at all.
But it does happen. But
has
I'll
happened,
even say another example like that. Nothing worse than having the exclusive, sending it to the buyer who you know will buy it. Doesn't buy it, but 6 months later, whether it's timing or so be it, they buy it. That to me is
And that has happened.
It has happened.
It's not common, but it happens. You want to say once a year?
Yeah.
That might be a lot, but once a year that happens.
So, all right,
it's
is
too
this
petty. It's not worth the
Yeah.
the juice is not worth the squeeze going around a broker. Maybe you get a deal, but
Well,
you
hang
just
on. In
trash
this
your relationship.
scenario that Steve just brought up, where we have the exclusive,
Yeah.
we don't sell the exclusive for whatever reason, and then 6 months later, the buyer that we sent it to ends up buying it. Maybe buys it through another broker.
Yeah.
Maybe another broker's marketing it at that point. Is that like a bad thing for a buyer, or they're just basically dealing with who had control of the deal at that time?
Control of the deal is different. If someone has control of the deal, you got to go with them, right? That's the name of the game. I'm not going to blame any buyer or seller for ever doing that.
Yeah.
That's just petty in my view. I just think that there's times where someone should be buying this, and then for whatever reason they just don't pay attention at that moment. Maybe they don't pay attention to you, or maybe the relationship's not there, and they just don't act, and then you see it transact pretty soon. Now it happens. It's the name of the game. I think that does, or it stays with a broker in the back of their mind for the next opportunity. Like, is that my first call, or is this going to happen again?
Let me ask you another question. There's on-market and off-market deals. So some people have like quiet, like off-market listings. You send it to who you think is an obvious buyer. They don't really do anything with it. They sit on it. The seller thinks that the broker that's working the off-market can't get it done after a month or two, and then decides to hire a different broker on an exclusive basis. And as the buyer, you saw the deal originally from one broker in an off-market capacity. Now 2 or 3 months has gone by. A different broker has the exclusive. What is that buyer to do?
So that buyer, it goes a few different ways. That buyer has every right to buy it through the exclusive broker. You probably should. I would do the same. Okay. But that being said, depends how far it got with the other buyer. If you put offers in, if it's in writing, if you have a commission agreement, like the seller of that building needs to honor that. And listen, it's not we never want to bring a client of ours into a situation like that. I never want to get in the way of someone buying a deal, but also we do this for a living. We're here to make money, and if we added value, like there's a discussion to be had. But broad stroke, you go with who has the exclusive.
You go with who has control of the deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's my
Okay.
opinion.
Yep, I agree. We're talking about buyer mistakes, and I just want to see if that is a mistake for a buyer to do when they saw it from one guy first, and then a couple months goes by and someone else has it. What should the buyer do? So I just want to make sure that buyers aren't making those mistakes and are maintaining the best relationships as possible with brokers in a dynamic market where it's not always clear how people should act, and they're trying to maximize their deal flow and deal exposure.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Any other buyer mistakes?
I don't think it's a mistake, but I think one thing that just came to mind is having transaction history with a broker or brokerage firm. What I mean by that is there's plenty of scenarios and situations where we have 2 buyers at their limits at the exact same price. Obviously, one person's going to buy it. I'd say 99 or 9 out of 10 times, it's going to be the buyer that has bought or transacted through that broker that is going to win that deal.
Yeah.
And that's just the business. First of all, our job is to make sure not only we get a good price for the seller, but that it closes.
Yeah.
And without any history, it's hard to make that argument against the other buyer.
Yeah.
And also to add, because you got my brain thinking, and I thought about other situations. Don't go to an exclusive. Don't see a deal and go after it with like your broker.
Oh.
That's the worst.
I can't believe we haven't talked about that yet. It happens.
Seriously.
It happens, but it's like how the hell did you even think about that was a good idea? So it happens, but it's rare. But yeah, it's happened where a buyer sees a deal either through it's an exclusive of ours or an off-market deal. Usually it's like an exclusive, and they have a buyer that they work with, a broker that they work with, and that broker reaches out saying, "Hey, I represent this person."
After you sent it to them.
After you
I was
you
gonna
are
say,
never going to get that
to
deal.
be clear, if that broker brought the buyer to your deal,
Yeah.
that's one thing. We want
100%.
to make the deal.
Yeah.
It's when you bring it to the buyer's
Yeah.
attention.
Yep.
Because in New York City, you have dual representation. You
Yeah.
have the right to do that.
Yeah. And it's happened. There was
Yeah.
one time last year that I can remember. It was a nice sized deal, and it was a big owner, an owner that I'd love to do business with. But he came to us through another broker, and we sent him the deal. We sent him the deal, and he came to the deal with another broker.
He forwarded the deal to his broker and
Yep.
said, "Go get this for
and
me."
he actually thought that he had a chance of getting the deal.
Did he buy it?
Obviously not. and it sucks. I would have loved to sell it to him, but why did you do that?
And are you going to send him deals going forward?
Yes, of course. But
Okay.
Of course, it's a big owner, but like that was a deal that he could have had that obviously we're not going to go with him. I mean, first of all, if he was the highest offer, we would have went with him, but he wasn't. There was two other people at the table, but he just eliminated himself. Don't do that.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Anything else?
I think that's it for the topic.
it.
All
It's
right.
a good topic.
I think
Good.
I'll just add, like, we're here to help. Like,
Yeah.
we want to get
Yeah.
deals for you.
Yeah.
When I say deal, we want to sell you properties.
Yeah, reach out, come into the office, let us know what you're looking to do. If you're looking to buy real estate in New York City, you should be speaking to us, and you should be speaking to every other active broker as well. Put some effort in.
All right. We'll leave it there.
Perfectly
Thanks,
said.
guys.
All right.
Speak soon.
What?